Good evening. Tonight, I'm joined by special guest, Mr. Ramsey, and we're going to be reading 6 true driving horror stories. I'll list down the timestamps of narrations in the description below. It's time to strap yourselves in as we journey into the unknown. We lived in the middle of nowhere, and to get into that middle, you had to take a long stretch of road that was surrounded by empty fields. I'm driving home at around midnight, and I crest the hill that takes you onto one of the longer flat stretches, and in the farthest reach of my headlights is this guy without a shirt, standing on the other side of the road. In that moment, I'd say we were 20 miles from town and another 10 from any of the people living out there. I screamed as I passed him and soon lost him in the darkness behind me. Before long, I finally made it home. As I slept that night, I started hearing noises outside my window. When I looked outside, I saw the same shirtless man trying to get into my car parked in my driveway. I froze in silence, but then banged on the window as to try and scare him off. Although my lights were off, he could see me, and he made eye contact directly into my soul. He then walked backwards, retaining eye contact with me, and then disappeared into the night. Thankfully, nothing like this has ever happened again. I was driving home from work at 2 AM. I'm a nurse and I live in a small city. The roads were totally deserted and it was a freezing night. I don't live far from work, maybe a couple of miles. I'm driving down a residential street, around the corner from my house, and I see a man laying face down in the street. Now remember, I'm a nurse. My first thought was, gotta help this guy up. I was coming off a long shift, and falls happen all the time. As I slowed down the car, I suddenly realized what an idiot move that was. I'm a 100-pound woman, and I don't carry any weapons. I thought I should do something to help the guy, so I called 911 as I drove past him and slowed to a stop at the end of the block. While I was stopped at the light, I explained to the dispatcher that there was a man in the road who might need assistance. All of a sudden, I hear a loud bang from the driver's side window. I screamed and looked over. A man was pounding on my window and jiggling the handle of my locked car. I'm looking in the rearview mirror and saw that there was no man lying on the street. Still on the phone with 911, I screamed to the dispatcher and floored it through the red light. I quickly told him what had happened even though I was right by my house. He told me to keep driving. After a few minutes I had calmed down and he told me to loop back around. I pulled over down the road from my house and stayed in the car. I didn't see the man anywhere, so I got off the phone with the dispatcher who told me he was sending police to cruise the area. As I gather up my things, I do a final scan of the area and I see the man. He's walking with 2 other men. I hunched way in my car until they were far down the road, then bolted into my house. When I was younger, my parents would let me sleep in the living room on weekend nights because my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up until dawn. But I always ended up sleeping on the couch to Nick at night. So one night, I wake up to a prickly feeling, like an instinct. I just bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. We lived in rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of trees. In perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of someone in this fucking tree. The family dog dashes to the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run into my parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there is a strange person outside. My dad grabs something defensive and darts outside with the dogs to beat the wax off the hot head. I tremble in Mum's arms until Dad comes home and says he saw no one and to go to bed. I decide to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill in my sister as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We're all still and I finally think I can sleep. Just as I thought I could, I noticed the man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a shush signal and runs away. He just turns around to run a straight line away. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours or so. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side, the really creepy ones you see a lot in movies. I had been driving for about 45 minutes and I was starting to get really tired. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. After it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass behind some bushes to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. For reference, the roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. The time was 11:22. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock, 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it's now 12:40. This time, it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rearview mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. At first, I thought it was that damn hook killer, you know, the one that scratched the couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. Fuck that, I thought to myself, so I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a fucking car parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, "Hey you, get the fuck out of the car now." I got the hell out of there. I sped off, and I never saw the guy again.
I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms to Albuquerque. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert east of LA. The shortcut was all two-lane road through total nothingness, except for passing through Amboy. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town nearly as far below sea level as Death Valley, with a dormant volcano and lava field on one side and a salt flat on the other. It was also at this time a hotspot for satanic group activity. I was driving by myself in the afternoon. I stopped in Amboy and snapped a picture of the city sign, just to prove I was there to friends who dared me to take that route to 140. I got back in my car and proceeded to drive up into the mountain range between Amboy and 140. Once I reach the top, I am driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach, I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stopped sideways across both lanes, a suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere, and two bodies laying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out a 9mm pistol and a chamber around. Something seemed very wrong. It looked too perfect, as if it were staged. An ambush? Was I being paranoid? Something was just wrong. Getting out of the car seemed unthinkable. It was the horror movie move. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive. Past the guy in the road on his left, swerved to the right side of the woman behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it, and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it or either of the bodies in the road. I continued forward a couple of 100 feet and slowed down so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rear view mirror, I saw that the two bodies had gotten up to their knees and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the 140 eastbound ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I gotten out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. Somehow I do not think it would have been good. Sometimes real life can be scarier than a movie. Many years ago I was on what was called a meet and turn. This is where a driver that is domiciled out of one city will drive a load halfway to its destination, while a driver domiciled out of the destination will drive halfway with a load that is destined for my city. We meet in a parking lot, switch trailers and drive back home. I had been on this run for a few months and found that I always got to the meet point about an hour before the other driver. It was a dark and empty dirt lot at about 3 AM, so I would stretch out across the seat and take a short nap. One night, about 10 minutes into my nap, I was awoken by a barking dog. I tried to ignore it, but it carried on for several minutes and got louder as the dog got closer. Soon, it became apparent that the dog was right outside of my truck barking at me. Okay. Either this dog is Lassie and is trying to alert me to something, or else he is just a pain in the ass, and I will need to throw something at him to scare him off. It is important to note that the barking had been going on for a good 10 minutes at this point, so I sat up and looked out my window. Standing there, mere inches on the other side of the glass, was a man of about 35. He was a large fellow and was barking at me. His eyes were crazy and he was frothing at the mouth a little. The scene really held my full attention for a moment. The sheer creepiness of this struck me. Gently and making an absolute minimum of sudden movements, I reached down and started my truck and slowly pulled away. He chased me, much like you might expect an angry dog to do, barking all the while. Needless to say, I played hell with my power naps from then on.
Those were 6 driving horrors. I would like to give a special thank you to Mr. Ramsey for helping out with this video. Head over to his channel for more of his work using the link in the description below. If you like this video, please give it a like and leave us a comment below. If you're new to the channel, subscribe to hear more horror stories. I'm back next week with another video.